Former President Donald Trump is scheduled to speak at the NRA's annual leadership forum later this week in Houston, Texas. That's right, in Houston, Texas. About a 4-hour drive from where 19 children and 2 school teachers were massacred by a gunman this week. The event is the largest yearly gathering for the gun lobby. And Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott and Senator Ted Cruz are also scheduled to speak. You know, a few of the politicians that could actually be focusing on this issue and helping their grieving constituents, but they're not. And in a brazen example of gun control measures to protect me, but not for thee, audience members in attendance will be prohibited from carrying guns, firearm accessories, and ammunition during the president's speech. It's interesting. Joining me now, political analyst Shermichael Singleton and Elise Jordan. Shermichael, how can Donald Trump show up at an NRA convention in Texas right after something like this happens, and then have the nerve to not allow people in the room with him with guns when that's why they're all there? They love guns, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, look, the NRA is and has been a huge staple in the Republican Party and Republican politics for a very, very long time. They're extremely influential, and they support a lot of very conservative members in the House and Senate. They were very supportive of Donald Trump. If you recall, when Trump was in office, he at least signaled that he was somewhat open to some type of gun reform. And then he had a meeting with the NRA, and by the end of the week, he completely changed his tune. And so I'm not surprised that he's speaking there. I understand why he's speaking there. In the room, he's former president. Secret Service are not going to allow individuals with weapons, if they aren't law enforcement, to be around a former president. So that's a pretty easy answer. But again, back to the question, the initial question about why there, it's an important group. This is a big moment for the NRA since they had that major lawsuit in New York. Having Trump there sort of gives them viability.
All of that is true. I think everything you just said, Shermichael, is true. But at least one of the things I think about all the time, especially during the pandemic, as we watched a million Americans, our fellow Americans, die of a disease that if we put masks on our faces, we could have prevented so many of those deaths. In the context of guns, I feel like all these politicians, they go to the NRA convention, they vote against gun safety legislation or don't even allow for a vote, all in the name of their reelection. Who cares about their reelection when it comes to the life of a 4th grader? I mean, why are we in a moment continually over and over and over again where we just accept the fact that Ted Cruz being reelected is more important than a 7-year-old's life?
Well, the NRA represents the extreme of Second Amendment protection views. They're absolutists. Their stance has always been, we can't give an inch, because once we give them high volume magazines and we give a little inch there, then they're going to go after something else. So we just have to stand firm. And that's the philosophy that has made them such a force to reckon with in American politics and cause politicians to bow at the altar of the NRA because they had so much funding. Now they've seen their influence diminished over the last couple of years because they've had such terrible responses to mass shootings and because of the internal turmoil and grift that the organization, was just rolling in. So they're not as strong and they're, I would say a wounded force. But the fact that Trump and other politicians still go and bow to the altar and won't respect what I would say is not up for grabs among Republican voters. I remember a focus group I did in Memphis a couple of years ago after a mass shooting, and Trump supporters, and they're fine with common sense gun reform like banning high volume magazines and universal background checks. And there were actually 4 or 5 teachers in that group, and they said the last thing that they wanted to do was to be responsible for handling a gun in their classroom. And so this is an issue where the elites of the party are out of step with the rank and file voters.
One of the things, Elisa, that's really important here is that the voters that she spoke to in focus groups actually support gun safety reforms. The polling bears that out, Shermichael. So one of the things I think we should clarify in this moment is that the Republican politicians are going along with the NRA because of the money And the NRA doesn't want restrictions because that means they can sell more guns and make more money. This doesn't have anything to do, actually, with some larger philosophical position. It's about the money. So speak to the idea in this moment that that's a status quo that at least the voters that are voting for these Republicans are willing to accept, apparently unaware that other people in other countries do not live this way.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would say it's about selling guns for the NRA. That's not what they do. They're not in the business of selling guns. That's what gun manufacturers are for. They're an advocacy organization no different than the Firearm Policy Institute or Gun Owners of America. And there are, believe it or not, there are many gun owners. I'm around a lot of these people very often who do strongly believe if we give a little inch, then they're going to take a mile and something beyond that. That is a very fervent belief among some of the diehards within the Second Amendment community. And so I guess if you were to separate more mainstream Republican voters from diehard gun owners, that would probably be a better approach to assess why the NRA is so hard-lined in their positions, but also why their 5 or 10 million members, who most of them are very hard-lined, continue to give money to the organization despite the mishaps of the organization, to then in turn put those dollars behind powerful Republicans who will not walk the line as it pertains to the Second Amendment, who will be zero compromise as it pertains to some type of gun reform. Now, with that said, as it pertains to mainstream Republican voters at large who are saying, we're open to increasing the age to 21. We're open to further and more extensive background checks. Those members, the NRA, aren't worried about those voters because guess what? They know those Republican voters, Zerlina, aren't going to go and vote for the Democrat, even if they don't like some of the hardline positions on guns that certain Republican leaders are taking. They know that they will still support those Republicans. They will still give to those Republicans. And so from the NRA's perspective, it's a win-win either way.
So, okay, take all of that to be true. But to be clear, I just want to clarify when I'm talking about the NRA in the context of this segment, I am including the gun lobby and gun manufacturers in that. So to the point about it's about money, I just wanted to make that clarification. But at least, again, what Shermichael said there, it still goes back to re-election. You're not willing to do something that the American people want, the majority, even the majority of gun owners that they want, because of your re-election. Why are we okay with our elected officials behaving in that way, that our lives are not worth more than their re-election? Who cares? Who cares?
Because the system is set up so that the Republican primary caters to the most extreme candidates who are catering to the most extreme voters who actually come out and vote in those primaries and keep a person in the running up against a Democrat who is not going to concede an inch and is going to stick with that philosophy. And honestly, I don't know what it would take. You look at the numbers of the lives lost, the infinite suffering of so many families. And, you know, we're up to just since 2009, Everytown research, they say that it's been, you know, over 1,500 lives lost. And you think of how many families have been affected by that. And I absolutely, if watching young children get mowed down in a classroom isn't enough to convince you that there's a need for common sense gun reform, I don't think there is. I think that political power will always be more seductive, and it's really depressing.
It's certainly depressing, but one of the things I've been thinking about all day, and we're going to be talking to Professor Eddie Glaude in a moment about American history, is the fact that after the first Selma March and after the second Selma March, those folks did not give up. And so it would be a little bit ridiculous for all of us in our privileged little bubbles to give up just because some Republicans want to get reelected to Congress. Elise Jordan and Shermichael Singleton, thank you so much for being here. And you can catch more analysis from Shermichael on his show, Screen Share. This week's episode features a discussion on gun control, and you can stream it on Peacock inside of the MSNBC Hub anytime you want. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.